Welcome everyone to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 2020, a panel discussion with Erin Sullivan and friends. The speakers today will be Kimberly Weimer, Michaela Villiers-Kendall, Gary P. Caton, Cline, Sue Hillyard, Moshe Wolfe, and Michael Bartlett. And now we welcome Erin Sullivan. Please go ahead, Erin.
Thanks a lot. I'm on. Am I work? Is it working?
Yes, it's working.
Okay. And I'm sharing the right thing.
You can start your introduction and you can start to share your slides.
Oh. Okay. Oh dear. I just put I just hit share and it came to this. Oh.
Fantastic. We can see them.
Now, can I get rid of this clock with the data and everything? Yes, don't worry. I'm fine. I've got it together. I mean, I sort of. Anyway, as well as I have got it together, as anyone could, with Saturn conjunct Pluto in the heavens. And I was sitting outside last night. It was a beautiful, perfect full moon. And of course, I don't have the vision to see. I could see Saturn, which is hanging high in the sky, and but I couldn't see Pluto. But then isn't that typical, really? Because with Saturn, what we often feel is, a sense of real positive structural, sort of ethos in that, both within ourselves and within the air around us. And Saturn is not all about sort of devouring his children, as I will also illustrate. And he's not also always about, sort of slamming you in jail or being very dark and deep and depressing. All of those things are all very true, but they're part of our psyche. And so this is where I have a problem sometimes with being negative about negativity, if you know what I mean, in the sense that I'm not, a perennial joyous person. I love a good laugh. In fact, I'd much prefer that to a whole lot of other things. And I was born in 1947 in November when Saturn was conjunct Pluto, and it was with Mars. And a very close friend of mine and a very well-known person to you, Howard Susportas, I was born in November of 1947 and he was born in April of 1948. And so I was born with Mars, Saturn, and Pluto conjunct. And then Mars went retrograde, and then it went back direct. And then when he was born in, 6 months later, he had Mars, Saturn, Pluto conjunct as well. And so we both had this sort of vicious cycle in our lives. And we always used to love to just have the most hilarious times about the most darkest things, simply because we didn't really find it very scary. We didn't like to be scared people. We did different things together that were, other people would probably think were pretty threatening. I mean, as far as going places and being in certain situations and so on. So it's at the same time, sharing them together. But the fact is that, if we want to get right down into the very nub of Saturn and Pluto, we will in the course of the 2 hours that we're going to be together. And there's several of us that have, I think, quite a lot to offer, for sure. I know the speakers in particular and the attendees who are regular and therefore very, very aware of what, our work is about in these videos. But the panel is something entirely new. And it's an opportunity for other people to bring in information that they've done. And I know that they've worked harder than I have, because if I had 10 minutes to say what I had to say, and there were 6 other people doing it too, or that many, I would probably be completely freaked out. Meanwhile, I'm just like sort of freaked out. And, you know, I got caught up, which is not a good idea, but I got very caught up in the horoscopes of the planets, Saturn and Pluto, and their mythological aspects, which would be natural for me to be interested in it because I'm a classicist, and to me, the origins of Western civilization, you know, did begin, yes, in Mesopotamia, but it was really, really quantified in Greece. And so I wrote here, conscious structuring and ultimate rebirth. Terrific. It all sounds very, very romantic and very exciting. It takes very much time to do this on a global scale. It just simply cannot. It just doesn't, people just don't rise up in mass. Someone has to start it. Somebody in the area or in the world, you know, needs to start something that other people glue themselves to. And that's how we look at Saturn with Pluto. If there's something going on that none of us are aware of, Pluto, yeah, so it's hidden, it's recessed, it sits in the back of the mind or in some other place, right? But when Saturn comes in, it actually demands that it give form. So whatever it is, the darkness or the danger, you know, and for instance, this is by the way, this picture is a picture of frozen ice, herbs, yeah? So it's actually a herb. And I went outside and it was all like sparkling with ice and it was beautiful. And so that's what this photograph is in the middle of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. It's sort of like, it's so cold out that this snap freeze created crystals all over this herb. And so from there, and this one I showed last time. Have I not got my, I don't have my slideshow on. Thanks for telling me. You probably didn't even know. Anyway, this I showed last time. Now, the reason I'm showing it now is not because I'm still hung up in the 60s. I'm not. I'm hung up in the 70s, which is what I am. And so, but this activity took place between flower children, which we were called freaks. We were like serious, dark, heart hippies. And the dialectic that took place between the cops, who were just standing there going, wow, you know, these people are so beautiful. What are we supposed to do with them? And they're like, this is the cute girl offering a flower to one. He's going, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? You know, like I'm supposed to be shooting them or beating them or something. And so during this Saturn opposite Uranus and Pluto in the 60s, mid-60s, was actually full of people who were born under a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, generally speaking, the generation, Saturn-Pluto in Leo. And so that is why I put that one in there, because it's just part of our, and this I showed when I wasn't supposed to, because it went on and on and on seeing this. But quite frankly, the day that they sighted Uranus was the day that the solar system burst open and began to incorporate opportunities for motion and movement. I'm just going to demonstrate a couple of things that Uranus offered. It offered, you know, people opportunities to leave their father's job, for example, and go and build a career of his own. People began to migrate. People changed countries. It was an incredibly inventive period of time during the Uranus sort of 7 years and following thereupon, time of inventiveness. And then we got into what I want to point out with this slide is, to my mind, just absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, the only way that you can really do, people say, how do you do this research? And I say, I actually don't really call it research. It's I just get hung up on something, and I have like an OCD thing where and that's part of what astrology has been for me, has been the opportunity to be compulsive and thorough and endlessly gripped by something that everybody else thought was complete lunacy. And then as I began to open my eyes and look out and reach out and set up classes and you know, the BC Astrological Society in Canada. And so suddenly there was like tons of these people who are all weird and looking at planets and looking at aspects and looking at it very differently. But here's what I want to show you, unless you've already noticed by looking at these horoscopes, is that every single outer planet has got a Saturn hard aspect to it. Uranus was sighted with Saturn opposite to it within about 7 weeks, yeah? But it came back and forth. It was Saturn opposite Uranus. Neptune was sighted when Neptune was exactly held in the safe arms of Saturn. And Pluto was sighted when Saturn was opposite to it. Yeah. So it seems to me that we have to have Saturn if we want to hang on to something, if we really want to build it, if we want it to last. You know, I mean, Lemurang pie is not going to last just because you made it under a Saturn transit. However, the whole concept of what you have done in a time frame, it will become more and more meaningful, more and more realistic, more and more practical. And that's what the whole dynamic of Saturn is about, is to keep things in a stable or a static position, not meaning motionless, but that if there is an origin point, it will lead to another one. In other words, at some point, when Saturn was at Neptune, when Neptune was sighted, we can predict cleverly that 15 years later, it's going to be in opposition to Neptune. And then 7.5 years later, it's going to be on the moon coming up to make a square to Neptune. And then in 29 years, it will come back to where it was, where it started out. So there's rhythm and regularity. Saturn really likes to know what's going on. You know, I don't know a Capricorn in the world who either knows everything that's going on or who would rather die than not know what was going on. So we have our you know, archetypal aspect to these outer planets. And on the next one, again, I showed these before, but I wanted to make it really clear that this is the beginning of where we're at now, okay? Because where we're at now, and we're going to look at that chart next, or third, but where we're at right now is we're at a period of time with Saturn conjunct the natal Pluto. Saturn is conjunct Pluto in the sky, in the heavens, out in the solar system, by way of the way we view it. And I'm saying that, how did we get there from here? Okay, because all of us know about the 60s until we're, you know, blue in the face. That isn't the point. It's not about the revolution, although I do believe that we need to reinstate it. I really do. And I think it's starting to happen. That young Swedish girl, is it Gerda? Does anybody remember her name? Tell me her name, because this young girl, she's become an icon, yeah? She's been made into one. She started out knowing that this is what she wanted to do. This is no accident. She had a thing in her head. She just had to do this, and it's because she really means it. And so therefore she's both, you know, innovative, but she's also really concentrated and conservative. You know, it takes a very conservative person to hold the scene together in order to do a revolution. So when we have 60s consciousness, Saturn, everybody raving on about Saturn opposite Mars, Saturn, or Mars, Uranus, and Pluto, yeah? So we have Saturn opposite Pluto. The next aspect that will happen is Saturn will trot through Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, and then it'll get to mid-Gemini, and then it will square this Pluto by transit if we fix the chart. But if it's a real life situation, then what ends up happening is that Saturn does move along to get to the sign of gets to Libra. It's with Mars, and it's opposite to Uranus. Sorry, Saturn is opposite Pluto. Then it moves along to get to the point in Libra where it squares Pluto. And that was where we're getting to now, is here we are today. I had an interesting time with this one because I have two of these charts. I think I've got, yeah, okay. I'll just start off with here. Saturn-Pluto conjunction is not a regular cycle. It's because Pluto actually spends 32 years in the sign of Taurus, and it spent 12 years in Scorpio. Now, I have to laugh because it makes me think, well, you know, if it's been that long, I don't know that I would want to, what it would be like to have Saturn in for, 13, 14 years in one sign, especially if you were a Taurus and went retrograde back and forth 5 to 6 times every year. Yeah. So the Saturn-Pluto conjunction itself is not a regular cycle. And that's due to Pluto's elongated and angular relationship, as it says here, with the ecliptic, as we will see. And this is where the first Saturn-Pluto conjunction takes place, but I've made another one for the next day because it's better, it's more interesting astrologically. And so that's the chart of the result of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, the Saturn-Pluto opposition that took place with Uranus in the 60s. And we are now, I'm 72, and I was like just the right age. I was like right dead center in the age bracket of the 60s revolution. And now I'm maturing and aging, getting old, things are falling apart, even though the I Ching says that they're not, but they are. I mean, that's what the I Ching often does say, is things are falling apart. It's like, oh no, let's throw another I Ching. Can't do it, doesn't work, that's against the rules. All right, so here we are. We are now back at the cycle that we were halfway to not long ago. Let's go to this one because I like this one better. And then, can you see why? It's just a few hours later, one day later, but the Sun and Pluto and Saturn are all 22 Capricorn. And the thing about this picture that we have here is because the nodal axis, it doesn't have to be conjunct to be effective. Okay, I often will say that to a client if they have some knowledge, and they'll say, oh, but look at it, the Saturn's almost going to be conjunct to my moon, and I'm going, well, sometimes a conjunction is a conjunction, and sometimes it's not quite that bad. And but it remains the same. So here we have Sun, Pluto, Saturn, all at 22, 44, 48, and 52 minutes of Capricorn. And the south node is at Capricorn. And so it is on its nodal axis, just like it was when the nodes and the planet line up. You have a cosmic karmic effect. And I don't use that word lightly because I'm too aware of my own karma, of what I have brought with me, what goes before me, what I've passed on. I have kids, I have grandchildren. I'm watching it play out and I'm watching it improve. So, it's not good karma, it's not bad karma, it's just karma. Yeah, it's just, one time Jeff Green and I were having a laugh and he says, yes, yeah, that must have been when karma ran over your dogma. I said, that's great. So somebody made a t-shirt and everybody was wearing it, which is really cool. So
yeah. Would it be okay to move to our first speaker, and you can come back and read this?
All right, I'll leave this then. I just want to make sure that
if you can share, it's the red button at the top of the screen.
Stop share, okay.
And now over to Kim Marie. Kim Marie Weimer, welcome.
Hi, I'm Kim Marie. She's on mute.
All right, I'm unmuted. Give me just a moment as I figure this out and share my PowerPoint.
I have time.
Okay, all right, we did it. All right.
Nice, beautiful. You know what? Let me say this, please. I have been telling people that now I'm 72. I have a year life as a septile. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
My progressed sun is 72 degrees from my natal sun. So life as a septile. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
So
no worries. No worries. I'm gonna go through some slides real fast. Hi, Erin. Hi, everybody at EA Zoom. I'll go through some slides real fast, and then we'll have a little bit of time for discussion. I don't remember how much time I have though. So, Linda, if you can let me know, 5 minutes, is that it?
Yeah, 5 or 10 minutes, and then discussion with Erin for another 5 minutes.
Sure. Okay. All right. Gotcha. So as you can see on your screen, Uranus is in process of making biseptiles to Pluto. And the joke is by what? And so you can see septiles are the harmonics of the number 7, the visual on your lower right screen. It's the circle divided by 7. Which works out to be 51 degrees, 25 minutes. So here are the dates that Uranus is making these waxing biseptiles. And when Erin had her last talk with everybody, it was November 14th, which was the exact date of the middle of the 7 biseptiles. And the point I want to make is that these aspects are just as strong as the first quarter squares. You know, it's hard to follow Mercury making a biseptile to Venus, but when we have these slow outer moving planets that we're discussing here, you can see with these 7 aspects, we've got some time to observe this and see how it's happening in our world. Here's a visual to show you where the 7 aspects are in their phases. You'll have this to refer to if you want. Here's another visual that I made if we would put Pluto, say, at 0 degrees, and for instance, back to its 1965-66 conjunctions with Uranus. We all remember when it made those first quarter squares in 2012-15. Well, here it is right now at 102.50 from Pluto, back and forth 7 times before eventually we'll have the waxing trines in Gemini Aquarius. And so this biseptile is within that first quarter phase, that crises in action. If you notice the blue on your screen, there's 2 key words with all septiles. The first one is these aspects will bring about a sense of a special destiny. And what it is it's a time period for the soul to realign with whatever its evolutionary path is between those 2 planets. When it comes to the biseptile in first quarter phase, it's about manifestation. We've got to bring something into form. We've got to materialize it. The second key thing to learn about all septiles is many times it will bring about what appears to be fated events. And we could just look at this in terms of US politics and how what we have going on today in the US presidency, is it fated to raise consciousness to the masses in some way? So again, Uranus biseptile Pluto, it's bringing potential to realign with evolutionary paths personally in your own chart, wherever you see those 2 planets activated by transit, sign house. But it's also there on broad collective levels for all of us to realign in some way. Think climate change. If we don't have a realignment with all the fossil fuels we're burning and divest from them, it's going to be pretty harsh on planet Earth. Point is, though, with these aspects, as you can see through thousands of years of patriarchal distortions, we're not guaranteed for realignment. It's going to depend upon the degree of involvement of the masses, each of us personally, to see if we can bring change with these Uranus by Pluto septiles. For instance, remember Uranus first quarter square Pluto, and we were all going, Yahoo, we're going to break free from all that Pluto Capricorn conditioning, dogma, etc. Did that happen? Some ways, other ways it didn't. And so my last slide is like, what is necessary for each of us individually to break free from our own past in order to find the courage with these biseptiles to move forward into a new future, however we want to create it individually, collectively. All right, that's it for my slides. I was so timed up to just do, 2-3 minutes.
Oh, but this is very, thank you.
Yeah, so here, I'm back to the dates for everybody.
Yeah.
So have you ever worked with biseptiles, Erin?
Actually, no, and I realized that I'd made a mistake, and I mean that life has a quintile.
Quintile, that's it. Yes, yep.
And so all I'm going to do is correct myself and say, wow, Uranus is biseptile Pluto. I would never have thought of that. And so with you having talked to me about it, I understand it. And I mean, I do understand the little baby aspects that are really have loud voices. And I think because they take so long to evolve. Yeah. And so that's why everything doesn't happen overnight, even though you and I want them to, and you even suggested it could, we knew why didn't happen. But there's something fated about the whole thing, as you wrote it. It's fated. And the fates, the 3 fates, there's Clotho, the weaver, Lachesis, the spinner, or the Clothy, the cloth maker, Lachesis, and Atropos, who's the cutter. So but they're all informed by Mnemosine, which is memory. So it's almost as if we have to remember before we can actually go forward. So and that's where our work in astrology is so phenomenal, is that we actually do have the capacity to, in some hardcore way, go back and do the back work. See if we can, through that consciousness, when you show the historical aspect, which isn't tremendously, hugely historical back to 2018, but I bet if somebody took this and went further, and I'm sure you have, otherwise you wouldn't be able to speak so lucidly. I think that this adjustment that has to take place, I think it's actually going to be much more difficult than any of us idealists really would like to think.
I think of it and do not, I always put this preface in, I don't mean to hurt anybody. Let's put it that nice little way. But I am not a fan of Donald Trump. And so as I've been pondering, as I've been pondering,
in the same room with all of these people.
I know. Oh, you know how you get your comments in social media, When I've been pondering this aspect and I'm thinking, in the collective, is it somehow fated that we have to have these Donald Trumps and Boris Johnsons of the world to help us wake up?
I think so.
Yeah. Say, I don't want to go down this Pluto and Capricorn patriarchal road anymore.
Well, we've got a little ways to go yet. And, it's definitely because it's only midway through the cycle. But you see, what you've done for me is you've saved me a bunch of time, because not one of us has the time to know everything. I know that sounds odd, but I don't. And so I'm actually now seeing proof on yet again another level astrologically of what I know to be true, and that is that it takes a hell of a long time, and it takes quite often tragedy for it to change. I mean, real tragedy.
Yeah, that cataclysmic evolution,
Like,
Jeffrey would talk about. Yeah.
With that, you know, the biological end of variance of species is absolutely shocking, and it's daily, minutely. So, I mean, this is something that we don't walk around thinking about all the time, but as soon as we read it, we go, oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Yeah, this aspect too, I think of it in terms of climate change and how much of a, you know, choice point it is for all of us on humanity in regards to how many species we're going to have left in the next, you know, few years.
Yeah, it requires the inevitable Pluto to undergo a shocking awakening in order to be able to, you know, perhaps make some use out of the tragedy of what has happened. Because there's very little we can do about certain things. We cannot bring back species, for example.
Right.
You know? But, you know, last time I said, you know, one day there was 5,000 Neanderthals in the south of France, and the next day there weren't any. So, you know, there's a certain something that we just have to come to terms with. And I think philosophically, that's going to be most important for people like us, is that we can live with ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I also think that the fact that, you know, all of these aspects are taking place in two signs of the earth element, it also adds to the theme of climate change and literally survival on planet Earth, and what is Earth physically going to look like as we keep going.
Well, I know, and I mean, we were pretty outraged back in the 1960s, knowing full well what was coming, and now we're outraged because we've seen it come and go, and now we've got yet again more of it coming. And you know, with no Earth in my chart, I think, oh man, you know, I don't know how I'm going to survive any of this. But the thing is that I look at my grandchildren who are between the ages of 19 and 24, 25, 24. And I think, you know, like what they're doing for work is very environmentally friendly. And it's also psychologically friendly as far as how it can make people feel. And I think that there's a lot of positives that can come out of these biseptiles and these odd, weird little aspects, you know, or I should say, aspects, the angular relationship, 102 degrees, 50 minutes, that starts getting really kind of woo-woo. And I think maybe it's in that little tiny, tiny twist, you know, you're twisting, you just got one more crunch to turn that screw into the hole, and suddenly it's done. I think that I would say that would be like a biseptile work.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. This is great. This is fantastic. So thank you very much to Kim Marie.
Thanks, Kim Marie.
Oh, thanks to all of you.
Thanks, Kim Marie. If you could please stop share. And our next guest is Gary P. Caton. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Awesome. Is it all right if I comment briefly on what Kim was sharing?
Of course.
Good, I'm glad you will.
Well, Erin, you may be the quintile. I'm the septile. I just turned 51 last year. So I'm the septile. But what she said about fated, I think that it's very true that we were fated to experience this kind of president, because if you look back at the discussion that went on between the various states before they confirmed the Constitution. For instance, you can look up speeches by Patrick Henry in the Virginia Congress where he was saying, I don't like this Constitution. Your president may easily become a king.
Oh.
He literally said that, and in fact, if you just Google that, you'll see the speech I'm talking about. And he warned way back then of the dangerousness of abusive presidential powers. So I think it's true that we were fated to see that, because certain people saw it even back then. And if they could see it then of course we were fated to experience that by going down that path, you know. What I wanted to share today, I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. What I wanted to, can you see that?
Yes.
All right. What I wanted to share today, not so much, I don't have any definitive conclusions, but I do have some ideas that I want to share with people, and maybe that's really my hope, is that just to turn people on to some new ideas regarding this whole thing, or a new way of looking at it, and see, you know, maybe that will be something that people can come up with their own ideas about. But this is a graph of the latitudinal ranges for the various planets. Now, so the ecliptic plane is the path of the Earth around the sun, right? It is literally the orbit of the Earth around the sun. Now, we see it as the path of the Earth through the sky, or the path of the sun through the sky. That's what we see it as. But it is literally the Earth's orbit around the sun. Now, our solar system has evolved through entropy, the law of entropy, it's evolved to the lowest energy state, which is a disk. So all the other planets, except this guy way out on the end here, have taken up orbits that are relatively on the same plane as the Earth's, although slightly different. You'll see Venus is the closest planet to Earth, so her latitude gets larger because of her proximity. If I was to stand on a platform 1 foot high and I'm only 2 feet from you, I would feel as if I'm towering over you. Whereas if I stood on a platform 1 foot high and I was 10 feet from you, it wouldn't be as noticeable, right? So that's why Venus's latitude is so high here. And in fact, the major planets that have wide variations in latitude is the distance north and south from the ecliptic, right? Notice that Pluto is wildly different than anything else in this scenario. And in fact, and I'm not advocating for this, but this is part of the whole idea of claiming that Pluto is not a planet. And so this is just the astronomical reality, that Pluto varies with respect to the ecliptic very wild. In fact, it's more like this, you know, it's a very wildly inclined orbit. It's extreme, and we all know that Pluto is extreme in its nature. Now, what I stumbled upon when mapping these things out was kind of astounding to me. I saw this graph, and full disclosure, I'm not a Bernie bro, because I detest that term, but I am a Bernie Sanders fan, because he's been talking about this subject for 40 years, since the 70s. He's been talking about wealth inequality. And when I saw this graph, I said to myself, oh my God, that looks like the graph that I was doing when I was doing the astronomy stuff. And lo and behold, the guy that I was working with and producing these graphs, he mapped out this. Here is the map of Pluto's latitude. And then if you just mirror that as if it were the other way, this is the same graph, just flipped. And you'll notice that it literally, now this is from a government source. This is the measurement of the difference between the top 0.1% of the population and how much wealth they own versus the entire bottom 90%. This is a map of the difference. It was relatively equal in the 1930s as Pluto was being discovered, and then it became less and less and less. So that basically the gap between the amount of wealth between the highest wealthiest people and the regular people was getting smaller, that there was less inequality. And then it comes back down here, and then beginning in the 1980s, and you know, we can name names, I don't think I need to tell you who was what back then, but it begins to plummet. And now we find ourselves basically right back where we started when Pluto was discovered in 1930 at its, by the way, Pluto was discovered at its north node, yes? Pluto was discovered as it was piercing the ecliptic plane, heading north. And now we find ourselves at the opposite point where Pluto is crossing the ecliptic plane going south. And we find ourselves right back where we started from with this massive inequality. And I recognize that it's an interesting statement about the Uranus-Pluto with respect to the Earth signs, because this last Uranus-Pluto conjunction that I was born under, it was the first one to occur in Earth signs for a very long time, right? They were occurring in the fire signs for hundreds of years, and then that was the first one in the Earth signs. And then you had Earth Day right after that, right? And now we have this biseptile between the Earth signs, and my heart weeps for the loss of species and for the Earth, truly, and for the people, the indigenous, or I think in certain places they call them Aboriginal people, indigenous people, however we want to refer to First Nations. My heart weeps for them, but at the same time, I think that this problem here, you know, I looked the other day, I saw there was one of these articles that you see that comes up talking about, you know, Einstein wrote letters to all kinds of people back in his day. And Einstein thought that the main problem for humanity was war. How do we solve the problem of war? But to me, I look at this and I think, you know, I think that maybe war is more of a symptom of this problem, and that this problem, the massive inequality between like just a very few people holding all the wealth in the world, that war and perpetual war might actually be a symptom of that, and that this indeed might be the major problem that we have, and that if we can solve this problem, we can solve all the others. Now, I'm not saying I know the answer, but I just think that it's very, very fascinating to me that that this map is pretty much almost exactly the same for Pluto's latitude with respect to the ecliptic, and for the wealth inequality thing going on. And you know, if we, a couple questions arise from this. A, has it always been this way? The answer is, I don't know. In other words, what I do know is that prior to this was in history, we have an era known as the era of the robber barons, right? There's a huge mansion here in Asheville that was built by the Vanderbilts, where, you know, you've got doors that are literally 7 times a person's size, and all kinds of things going on in there, and this massive amount of wealth that it took to build buildings like this and do things like that. I'm pretty sure that if we took this graph backwards, that the inequality was larger back then in the late 1800s, even larger. And so it makes me wonder, are we then heading into another age of robber barons? Are guys like Bezos and Zuckerberg the new robber barons? And if they are, do we have the power to, you know, keep this curve from continuing? Because if the curve continues, obviously it goes the other way. So these are just, I have more questions than I have answers, but it is astounding to me that the latitude for Pluto corresponds so incredibly close to this study of wealth inequality, and I just think that it shows me that this issue is a legitimate issue, and that it's maybe even the major issue that human beings need to concern themselves with.
Thank you, Gary. Fascinating. Erin, would you like to respond?
Yeah, it was fascinating because, to me, Gary, thank you very much. It was really amazing because it brought back the whole idea about this business of the origins of things, whether it's planetary discoveries, which is not the origin of the planet, and the origins of depression in the economical and the social world, and the problems that we're now facing, reaching a cyclic relationship with each other that have very weird relationship diagrammatically with astrology. And of course, I mean, I would think that, wouldn't I? And I'm sure that we all do. But the thing that's really starting to come clear with people's focus and interest is on the minutiae that is necessary to see that which cannot be seen otherwise. Now, that's one thing that a microscope will do, but it's also another thing that astrology will do. And if you get obsessive enough and anal enough, and you really get at it, and and then you're going to find out stuff that nobody else has found out before, or you're going to find a relationship between something that nobody else has noticed before, which to me is even more interesting than something that's never been found before. But to find resonance, if you will. Rupert Sheldrake is a person that I know fairly well, and I call him Rupert Resonance because he's always going on and on about how the cat will be waiting for you at the door, and it's true. Every time you drive up the driveway, they know you're coming. Yeah, and the dog is like wetting itself, twirling around on this when you're not even up the driveway yet. So this fish here that I'm looking at on the screen is very interesting because it's swimming along with I guess, are the red and the blue related to the parties of the United States?
Well, that's probably an unfortunate choice of color. No, the red would be, well, I mean, we can speculate, but the red would be the uber rich, the 0.1% people who have absolutely billionaires, right? And then the blue would be the regular people who have, basically nothing.
Yes.
In fact, for most people, their wealth is measured in negative terms. They have more debt than they have stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And these are the things that we're facing, aren't we, Gary, with Saturn Pluto coming together again in an aspect which also enhanced by being upon its own nodes. And the signs, with Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn, and the South and North node being Cancer, Capricorn. Yeah. So what we're seeing here is, what your diagram is, and the other one prior to that, what it manifests for me is nothing proves anything, okay, especially to a Scorpio, but images tell me everything. And when I see something like this, I just go, I get it. I get it. I see it. And not that I didn't know about it, but I think that the amount of work that we've put into this, and that people have put into creating understanding of the darkness of these Saturn Pluto cycles and what they bring to awareness. Okay, it's not that the Saturn and Pluto are horrible, as you'll see. It's that they come together in cycles to point out things that have gone awry, yeah, and that are threatening, yeah, and that make people depressed and cause them to experience a great deal of dissonance, cognitive dissonance, if you will, to the entire situation in which we are now existing. And so, just a little picture, it's worth, at least 150 words.
Thanks. I'm glad you got something out of it. Yeah, I just, I think about what Ken Marie brought up, and that we were fated to have this president at this time. And I hear, you know, when Trump got elected, a lot of people were saying, "Not my president," you know. And I thought to myself, well, since when have any of them been my president? Like, they're all rich people. There's never been a working class president, ever. When was any of them my president?
That's right. Like out here in New Mexico, Bernie Sanders has a big draw. You know, like, my kids go and they take their kids, and it's like, oh boy, you know, it's so we have, yeah. There's some meeting that needs to be met.
Okay, so
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the answer is to what classically what they say, vote with your feet, like refuse to participate in a corrupt system, whether that be Amazon or the U.S. election system or various things. I mean, that's for people, individual people, to decide for themselves. But yeah, I mean, it is a shocking kind of you know, understanding that this graph brings, and so I just wanted to share it with people. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, because it shows that everything has an origin, yeah, and that there is always a peak, and then there's always a coming together again. And so it's been, you know, it's been very nice. Thank you so much for your offering.
Yes, ma'am. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
yes, thank you, Gary, and thank you so much. That was fascinating. So now let's move on to Ari Moshe Wolfe. Welcome, Ari. Please go ahead.
Sorry. Oh no. I thought I was okay. Never mind. Sorry, I've done something. Am I gone?
You're still here. We're waiting for Ari Moshe to unmute.
I see. I'm
sorry. My speaker wasn't on. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, good. All right. Hello, everyone. The piece that I want to focus on right now is an appreciation for something that often goes under mist. In fact, it either goes under mist or it's given such an extreme emphasis that it's almost inaccessible. And that's just this notion that the entire world lives inside of us. And some of the things that we often forget about when we see the injustice and when we see the pain, we see the way that we're creating this world and hurting one another, hurting resources, and living in a way of disrespect to what is natural. It's profoundly easy to give our attention to primarily the level of fixing it, dealing with it, making changes, pointing out the bad guys, you know, praising the good guys, praising the good behavior, looking down upon negative behavior, right? You know, so at this day and age, there's a certain social awareness of, you know, what's not acceptable anymore. And this relates to how a person might speak, the way they might talk about different people from different races or different gender identities, different cultures. And what's also not acceptable is, you know, how a person might treat the earth. It's not acceptable in the Western culture to litter, right? But what is acceptable? Lots of plastic, right? You know, you can buy packaging, you can buy as much of that stuff you want, but as long as you recycle it, then it's okay. And I'm giving this point because 30 years ago, there's an entirely different standard. And 30 years before then, there was an entirely different standard. You know, using pesticides wasn't collectively seen as necessarily a harmful thing for the earth, and now it is. And so there's a tendency at every generation, at every era, for people in all around the world, for there to be a mass consciousness that basically determines what the standards are, what the moral, ethical, political, social standards of right and wrong. And that's sort of a Capricorn thing. There's always going to be a sort of thermostat where we settle into a collective agreement as to what, you know, what environmentalism looks like, what spiritual looks like, what social, you know, And then there's always going to be the Uranian Aquarian dimension, which are people that are just kind of seeing things a little more differently from a more elevated understanding. And they're, you know, living their lives, not buying any packaging, and they're using glass jars and, you know, are really attuned to the actual reality of plastic in this world, you know. And that's even right now still a little bit just beyond where the collective has yet found themselves capable of embracing. And there's something humbling, there's something meaningful in simply recognizing this trend. That one, collective evolution moves slowly because it has to catch on to the masses. It has to catch on to consensus. It needs to be believable. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be something that is seen as safe and viable and meaningful and important by enough people for it to be embraced by the majority of humans. And that too, there's always going to be groups of people that are urgently waiting and ready and already living beyond that. But it's humbling to recognize that, because it's very easy for us to become identified at any moment, in any generation, wherever we might incarnate, right? If we're going to incarnate in this day and age, or in 30 years from now, or in 30 years before now, it's so easy to become identified by the current cultural mythos and the cultural story of right and wrong and appropriate, not appropriate, all of those things, that we can actually become so conditioned and identified with the current times that we forget a more fundamental truth that actually has nothing to do with generations, has nothing to do with eras and cultural trends and what the masses are ready to accept at any particular time. And this more fundamental truth is what all the mystics and teachers have been telling us, which is the whole world lives inside, and also the world is an illusion, and both. And it's very easy, again, to hold that as either an extreme of, well, the world's an illusion, forget about it, I'm not going to care. That becomes its own dogma and sort of mischaracterization of one's understanding of illusion. And then the other extreme would be to become so invested in the world and believing in it and getting identified with the current story, like our current president in the United States and how bad he is and all the horrible things he's doing and the oppression and the racism and the sexism and the xenophobia and how much it hurts, how painful it is, right? Like it's, and that's real, and the pain and the everything is real. It's here. And I'm not suggesting that we should not go there, but to become mindful of the way that we are identified with it, where our story of what's happening in the world, it's so in our face, it's on the media, we're talking about it all the time. And are we building an identity? Are we building a sense of self out of all of this? And there's an invitation for us always at any generation, and I'll come to the Pluto-Saturn in a moment, to touch base with the deeper appreciation that who we are is fundamentally free from all of this. We're living in these times, and so there is conditioning. This is what we're working with. But there's something in us that is free from that. And the extent to which we are identified with the times is also the extent to which we will fail to recognize that the entire world is inside of us. We will only see Donald Trump as Donald Trump. We will only see pollution as an external phenomena. I teach an after school Hebrew school program for children. And we're talking about the Holocaust and Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. And one of the children asked, why would anyone do that? Why would anyone act with so much hatred? And what I offered in response was, instead of getting so focused on why would someone do that, can anyone here relate to what it's like to hate someone? Have you ever hated someone? Have you ever wanted someone to, wished ill upon someone? Or has someone hated you? And we just talked about that. And actually, at some point, one of the older children said, and this is profoundly wise, that what we don't understand, we're afraid of, and what we're afraid of, we hate and we resist. But when we seek to understand it, we also inherently, through the understanding, find that element within ourselves. Like we can't understand something out there if we can't empathize with it in here. There's no such thing as understanding that isn't personally relatable. It doesn't resonate emotionally, authentically within us in some way. And so we can all relate to those narcissistic, self-oriented aspects that we see in Donald Trump. We can relate to the phenomena of pollution in the micro aspects of the ways that we're living with ourselves, right? How do we treat our body? How do we treat ourselves with our emotions, with what we're feeling? What do we put in our body? Is waste being fully processed? Is it, digesting and eliminating? Or someone was speaking earlier about the phenomena of having so much. And how common is it in this consumerist culture, even those that are conscious, to be bombarded almost as if we're choiceless with so much stuff, so many possessions, so many things. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but how many of us can say that we're really free from it, that we're not possessed by it? That's what it was. It was, we have more debt than we have life, or something like that. I think that's a beautiful quote, whatever the quote, maybe later someone can help me what that quote was. And we become so entrapped and enslaved by the physicality of our lives that the energy doesn't flow and we become stagnated. And so this is such a big teaching, I feel, for any strong Capricorn, especially Pluto, Saturn cycle. We're entering a new phase. And so when you're entering a new phase, there's a very potent quality of leaving the past behind. You don't know what this is going to be like. We've never been here before. And so we can't do it the way that we have. I'm about to greet my daughter, who is soon to be born into this world, any day now, which is why I'm not really going to be able to stay on this call very long, because I got a lot of things to do. But there's a strong prayer that I'm just noticing inside of me, which is I want to complete the past as much as I can. I don't want to take anything with me here. I don't want to take anything with me in this ceremony, with what's coming my way. I want to be as here now as I possibly can. And so there's a natural gravity in my own consciousness, and this is happening on my 5th house cusp, the Pluto-Saturn conjunction. Children, there's a natural gravity in my own consciousness to really gravity is a great word. I'm gravitated towards, I'm just like impelled toward, I just default towards this introspective, where is there something that's not moving? And it's just like the timing of my life is calling for that. And I think this is in the collective for all of us, right? This is what I'm noticing right now as it's manifesting in this moment in time. But when we really recognize almost like the gravity and the seriousness, the realness of our life and the preciousness of this human experience, I'm blessed that a daughter coming into my world is really showing me that. I don't think it's necessary to have a daughter to realize these things, but I've been noticing that she is bringing this awareness to me of how earnestly I desire to leave the past behind. And so to reuse, reduce, recycle, clarify, simplify, align, heal, and work on the elements that are out of alignment within me. And then just like all these people, things, possessions, elements in my life, social, physical, psychological, everything is like deal. And it's a very beautiful warrior stance. Chiron right now is going direct. And eventually, Chiron is going to, later on, definitely, it'll be squaring Pluto in the fixed axis. But we can just kind of conceive of that the larger cyclic themes that are unfolding. Chiron's moving direct. It's moving towards the cardinal square. It's also squaring the nodes right now as we speak. So there is, in fact, a very strong calling right now to embrace that decisiveness, that warrior quality. And of course, it's never about it feeling good or it being easy. It's incredibly vulnerable and tender. So that's the teaching that I want to offer for us today, that there is more wellness, more grace, more ease, more peace, more true healing, I find, when we orient our reality not so much from the place of what's happening in the world, how can I fix it, how can I change it, or the judgments we have about it, but to also be earnestly devoted to looking at our own conditioning. Because our essential self, our true self, is not conditioned. And a part of this life journey is just working within time and space, working within structure
I
to
remember
unravel. Yeah.
your sound is really distorted.
Oh, it is not okay? Okay, well,
Just
how about now?
No, it sounds the same. You'll hear it on the recording anyway, but
How about now?
oh well,
Sorry, we're still getting your message. I can still hear it through this.
Okay. I just changed the settings. Is it any better?
no.
Well, then I'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ari Moshe. Thank you.
Ari Moshe.
Erin, would you like to go back to your slides? Or
Well, I'd like just a couple of words. I mean, everyone is just being beautifully aligned very differently, which is perfect, yeah, for what we're doing. And I guess the thing that I wanted to do, if I were to find how, okay, slide. How do I do that, Linda? How do I make the slide?
green share button at the bottom, the green button.
I have, and it doesn't, it just brings
And now
up.
click on your PowerPoint.
Thank you. Oh, she's so smart, that girl. I just don't know what to do with her. Anyway, I'm going to move. Okay, I need to move us. I want to change pages. Every time. Oh, dear.
The arrow in the.
Oh, there we go. Oh, perfect. Oh, sort of perfect. Right. I think that chaos was the origin of all things in the Greek myth and of origins. And so chaos isn't, like I said here, not a messy death, but it's an origin. And it's where we come from. We come from a great potential, something hugely, massively beyond, order. And so we have like chaos becomes cosmos, which means order in ancient Greek. And so chaos is afeminine, non-masculine, non-feminine. It just is what it is. It's a great cloud of possibility and potential. So here we have, just talking here, listening to people with a great deal of potential. I think a bottom line being that it's very important to realize that we can eat our own children. And I'm, particularly sensitive to Ari because it's very important that we recognize that we are capable of devouring our own creativity. Yeah. And in order to make cosmos, in other words, order, out of chaos, out of the origins of all things, it's time for us to recognize Saturn and Pluto's role in those two things. Because Kronos, Saturn, the ancient Greek, he actually devoured his children. I don't know how to change the how I can make this change. So I didn't mean to have it go there. Damn. Okay.
Okay, Erin, shall we move on to the next speaker?
Sure.
Are you sure?
Do you mind if I point this out? Because
Go ahead, just let us know when you're ready.
well, because it was so important when Gary was talking about the latitudinal range of planets, and also I was picking up a lot on Ari as well in his whole relationship with planetary array and the way it works. But I mean, I did show this before, but this is the same. I really want to get rid. This is the same kind of diagram, only solar systemically. And it shows that, at its highest point, it's 17 degrees off the plane of the ecliptic. And then we have Venus, who's 7 degrees off the plane of the ecliptic. And so Pluto and Saturn, who has an absolutely rigid, almost to the month timing, within the month timing. We have, and Pluto, which is just out there acting very strangely, and Kronos sort of devouring his offspring. And we have, having Kronos, Saturn coming up and castrating the heavens in order to take care of the problems that we're living they were living. I wish I could get rid of this bottom line of people. I'm sorry, I really like you all, but this is a photograph, a picture of Rhea giving Kronos a stone as opposed to a child, because he had eaten all of them up until Zeus was hidden away in a cave with wild women who raised him. But this is just another Greek picture that I happen to like, passing the baby over. And that is, we'll go there after. You want me to stop right now? Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Erin. Okay, let's move on to our next speaker, Michaela Villiers.
I need to move this. I really, really need to move it. I don't know how to move it. Oh, no, I can't see anybody. Okay, what? It's all right.
Okay, if you could please click the stop share button at the top of the screen, the red button. Right at the
That's it. Tombo. Okay.
Thank you. And now we welcome Michaela Villiers-Kendall. Please go ahead, Michaela.
Hi. Yeah, I don't have any slides because I don't know how to do it, but I've got to learn how to do that. I didn't realize we were going to do that, but anyway, I'll manage. I was just going to say, Erin, yeah, I was one of your old students back in the day, back in the mid-90s at the CPA in London.
Oh, yes, yeah. I remember you. Hello and well done. And I'm so glad you're still in it.
Yeah, hanging in there.
Well done.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, it was good old days, wasn't it? At the Regent's Park. And
it was fab. It was so classy, arriving in a black cap. I mean, you know, hello. And brought. I mean, it was just the best. We had a great time. And Howard being still alive, and and me having to go and give a lecture in his place. No, the day I was giving a lecture was actually 2 days after he had died.
Oh, God.
And I did it. But he would have done it too.
Yeah, sure. He was great. Yeah.
Well, he's the one that was talking about who was born with the Mars, Saturn, Pluto, just like me. Only he has it in the 7th house. And so we used to have the most hilarious, really dark sense of humor.
I bet.
Anyway, you go right ahead, Michaela. Thank you for reintroducing yourself.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, great to see you. And this is great having this, you know, it's great to be able to get together like this all over the world.
No, thank you, Linda, and thank you.
Yeah, amazing Linda and team.
No.
Anyway, so no slides, but let's see. So, yeah, so I can't really show I did the chart for GMT for the 12th of January Saturn-Pluto conjunction. But can't really show the slide. I mean, you can't see that. No, you can't see that very well. But anyway, interestingly, the ascendant comes out at 20 degrees Cancer, which is obviously the same as the lunar eclipse on the 10th of January, which is at 20 degrees Cancer. So the lunar eclipse, in other words, is rising in that chart for the exact conjunction of Saturn-Pluto. GMT. So, I mean, you know, this Brexit thing, oh God. And today, of course, is an election, Brexit election. Goodness knows how that's going to turn out because Neptune is squaring the full moon. And so I dare say it'll be a hung parliament. But interestingly, I mean, Neptune squaring the full moon, this is an interesting full moon. It's at Gemini, obviously, opposite the sun in Sag. And it seems all to be about truth and lies. I mean, the news today, I've been vacillating about how to go with this. I've done loads of stuff, and then it sort of changed at the last minute, and other stuff came in, and that I couldn't really ignore because it was to do with the other research I'd done. So on the news tonight was an amazing load of, I mean, like the UN was involved because it's actually was the UN Day, a Declaration of Human Rights Day on the 10th of December. And today, on the news was the genocides in Burma, which have gone to The Hague. I don't know if you've seen it, but what's her name? I've got it here. Hold on. Anyway, the head of Burma. There was a very good article actually on Sky, which I printed out. But the Rohingya massacres, genocides, which have been actually going on since 2012, but they increased in 2017. But it turns out they've been persecuted for years, since 91. But what I didn't realize, and what's interesting about this Saturn-Pluto conjunction, is if you look back in time at the other conjunctions and the squares, in fact, through at least the 20th century, and this is a very pivotal century, obviously, yeah, pivotal century. Esoteric astrology says that we are actually in the transition point, in like the darkest hour between the Pisces age and the Aquarian age. They say it's a 200-year period. That was Alice Bailey, and with the Tibetan. And actually, there's a really good book by Alan Oken, Soul-Centered Astrology, which I have had on my shelf for 25 years. I actually was lucky enough with a friend to go on a weekend with him, and he was a personal friend of hers, and he signed it. He signed my book. And I've dipped into it, but it was sort of above my head, and now I pick it up because things seem relevant all of a sudden, and it's just it's sort of all there. So I really recommend that to look at now, because he talks about so much. I mean, the Aquarian age and the 7 rays, and it's quite deep stuff, but it's right on. So anyways, esoteric astrology says that we're in the middle of the 200-year period, which started in 1917 to 2117. So we're dead in the middle. Really, 2017 obviously is the year, completely in the middle, but there's processes, you know, like 2012 was important, the lead up to 2016. And so, in fact, the whole of the 20th century was a process. And so we're in the middle of the birthing period, which feels like it is the dark sun. So I just wanted to say something about the black sun, which is Saturn. And it's an alchemical term, which is the nocturnal sun, which is the Sol Negir. And it says that the term black sun represents the nocturnal sun of the ancients, identified with Saturn or Kronos, and worshipped as the malevolent aspect of the dying god. Like the lion-headed god of Mithraism, the sun as a serpent would sink beneath the horizon and become a fish. Dag means fish and on means sun. Dagon is therefore the nighttime serpent sun, otherwise known as the black sun in various esoteric traditions. The black sun is a symbol of the underworld, so hence Saturn gets its reputation. In the zodiac, Saturn is the Sol Negir, or black sun, and corresponds to the winter solstice. Obviously when the sun reaches 0 degrees Capricorn, which is known as a period of darkness and death, because the sun disappears from view. But it is the darkest hour, so it also represents the beginning of the light. And that's the period on a larger scale, on a larger cycle, that we are supposedly at in our transition into the Aquarian age from the Piscean age. Obviously the festival of Saturnalia, you all know this, representing the harvest, hence the scythe, the hooded skeleton figure, you know, that representation of Saturn. So as we know, 0 degrees Capricorn is directly opposite 0 degrees Cancer. We've been in this Cancer Capricorn cycle with Saturn meeting Pluto in Cancer at the start of the century, the 20th century, which was of course the start of the First World War, which is really part one of the Second World War. So it's hit off with Cancer Capricorn all along. Then in 1947, it went to Saturn met Pluto, conjuncted Pluto at 13 degrees Leo. So it went to Leo then. And that was a huge year because obviously that was the start of the Cold War. Germany was divided. And this is the theme throughout the 20th century, the boundaries, of course. Boundaries, Saturn, Pluto, power, and abusive power can be. So every time there was a meeting or a square, there is something goes on with boundaries. As I say, Germany was divided in 1947 on that conjunction. India, the partition took place same year, actually both in August. And also Israel, of course, Palestine was divided. Partition happened then, November. So that was a huge pivotal year. And 13 degrees Leo, of course, is the planetary nodes come into that as well, which I haven't time to talk about, but you know, Jeffrey Wolfe Green talks about the planetary nodes, and you know, anytime the planetary nodes are hit, and particularly this Aquarius Leo, which is actually Neptune's planetary nodes, then there's a huge transition. And we're obviously heading for Pluto going into Aquarius in a few years' time. But anyway, we're at this part of the cycle now. And this comes up again. So on the news in Burma, as I say, the Rohingya have the Declaration of Human Rights has come up because they are Burma is accused. Burma is now it's May or something. May. I don't know. My notes are going everywhere as usual. Oh yeah. Okay. So what happened with Burma is that they actually were a British colony. They were colonized by the British. Now you're getting Britain come up again with the boundaries, and boundaries is doing boundaries and Brexit and Trump and the wall and Trump and abuse of power. You're getting all this theme, and we're being shown as the process goes to, we're heading now for the conjunction and the eclipse. So it's all coming up, what it's all about. And it's all about abuse of power. It's all about boundaries. It's all about the past and how we've got there and how we've unconsciously got there, how our shadow, as Jung said, our collective shadow and our individual shadow, which is, Ari was saying, it's the same thing, basically. But one reflects the other, to, fro, back, forth. And so you learn, you're informed from the collective, what happens collectively. You're informed individually. What happens to individually informs you collectively, and so on. Anyway, so this article says about, well, in Burma, what happened when the British left, and they left in after the war. So they left, and the borders were formed in that area, and their part, the Rohingya's part, was lost, really. Burma sort of absorbed them, but they became stateless eventually. They were made to be non-existent. And in the recent years, 2012 onwards, they've been actually massacred. Terrible business. Nearly 1,700,000 to 1 million people displaced into Bangladesh. Borders again, they can't get back. And now it's come up in The Hague. So, and The Hague, you know, 10th of December, 1948, which is when Pluto got to 16 degrees, I think it was Leo. And now you see that, actually, you see that in that chart for the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. You see the moon has then moved from the eclipse to 16 degrees Leo. So no doubt we'll see developments in that. It's going to go on for some time. But as I say, the British had colonized, they had actually, the Rohingya had helped the British fight against the Japanese. And they've basically been deserted. And the Burmese, the other side of Burma, actually fought with the Japanese. So it's like all these colonies through all this century and before, obviously in the 19th century and before then it all started. it's so now it's all coming back to roost. The chickens are coming back to roost. We have to examine our consciences, but we have to become conscious. And this seems to be what it is about. It's sort of feeding this Aquarian boundaryless world. But now we have to deal with the past. We can't just move on from it. We also feel like we've been undermined from it, as you said, with all this climate change, Erin, and everything. And we are feeling rootless. We are feeling like we're not safe anymore. The Cancer lunar eclipse at the same time as the Saturn Pluto. So our safety, our boundaries, where are they? But the fact is, it's all coming up because we have to get to grips with it now. We have to face our shadows as our shadow collective and individual. And I believe that's what is happening. And that is part of the transition to the world of Aquarius. And I think we'll make it. I mean, all this technology, yes, it's obviously the nuclear stuff isn't so great, but it is so great on the other hand. At least it stopped us from ripping each other to bits, although we still do it in pockets all over the world. Something always shows up somewhere. But overall, the technology that came out of the wars is aiding us. It's getting us together. We are seeing, we are awake, we are shifting, and we are literally seeing now. So there is no excuse not to face our shadows collectively, individually, and that's what we must do in order to move on, in order to move into the new age. So.
Excellent, Michaela. Now let's hear from Erin. Erin, would you like to respond?
I was talking away to myself. I'm terribly sorry. Anyway, I'll begin again. Thank you very much for what you were doing. I was really enchanted by parts of that, what you were talking about with the collective and the personal. But I wanted to, is it possible for me to just show you a couple more pictures?
Of course.
Because I'm very interested in, in what Michael is about to say. I'm trying to get my, there. All right. Remember, the thing that I think my hopes are little bits and pieces of unintegrated but then integrated talk is all about the fact that Pluto is connected to every single discovery, every single magnification of a global event, whether it's a sighting, whether it's a discovery, whatever it is. But look at this. This is a picture of Clyde Tombaugh. I mean, I love making a joke. This is a typical scientist. Don't you think he's darling? I mean, he is perfect. And look at his big toy. And look at the moon and Pluto together when he's in Gemini in his home house with all those planets in Aquarius. This is his chart. I mean, it's a sunrise chart. So we can say that the moon might have moved 7 degrees on either side. It doesn't matter. It's a moon-Pluto conjunction in Gemini of mind. And and he comes to Arizona to discover Pluto. And I thought that was just such a fantastic connection. And the second one brings me to a very important part of what he's doing, and I hope I'm doing the right thing. It's about Pluto. It's about Pluto not just being about devouring and death and so on. It's, here we have the Kore, the maiden, Persephone, picking the flower that her mother said, do not go near those flowers. There's something about the scent of a narcissus, I think, that is particularly very sexy. And then she spends 6 months, 4 months out of the year under the ground with Hermes and ready always to escort her to and fro. And she comes home every several months in order to be able to reinstate the world into spring and to bring fruition. So Pluto isn't about death, all about death. It's all about being able to experience the complete and utter, if you will, annihilation, which is different. To annihilate is to stop breathing. It's like we just don't, can't take it in. We need to understand that the annihilation of values and systems takes place on a very constant level since the beginning of time. One of my great teachers of philosophy and so on, Morris Berman, he was hilarious. He was always on about the, how meaningless meaning was, yeah? And it's that kind of tempting thing. And I'm going to move ahead here because it's really about Persephone and Demeter as the feminine function for Pluto, who we're talking about today. It's about a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And, there are dates that you can look up and find when they've been. I've got them all written down if anybody needs them. When they've been conjunct, and they've been very, very significantly involved in very important rituals. And, Kronos is about not eating your own children, even though he ate all of them except Zeus, who then, and then he comes to the place where that fellow with the long, thin legs and the wonderful, what's it called? Not by microscope, sorry, into the heart of darkness. I think that this is really true. I mean, I got there's several renditions of this heart that was noted by everyone when Pluto did its flyby. And the beauty of Pluto is its mystery. And life without mystery isn't worth living. And with Saturn coming to conjoin Pluto in a cyclic sense, and people forget that it spends 30 years in Taurus, at least 32 years, and only 12 years in Scorpio, that it elongates so that right now we're getting the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is going to repeat itself 5 times instead of the regular 3, which is most irritating to the person who wrote a book called Retrograde Planets. And in it has to deal with this whole possibility, reality, if you will, that the transit of any planet to Pluto is going to undergo, a very significant change in the way it appears, simply because it is not going to be in the same place. It will not remain as it should be. So with the Saturn-Pluto conjunctions, it's always initiated new horizons. It has always been involved in massive upheavals and overhauls of cultures, of great migrations that have taken place between people. It involves the ending of old ways of thinking that are simply not working anymore. It causes a lot of grief internally. There are many individuals whom I know and talk to and have done horoscopes for people who have just confessed to having suddenly burst into grief and have to go into the washroom because they work in a workplace, whereas I can just start crying on my couch if I want. And you're really, really experiencing death and loss and grief in a very, very deep way, but also in a controlled way. I mean, if you let it go on and on, it can become extremely bad for your body and your mind and your soul. And all 3 of those have to be in some way reasonably balanced, don't they? I mean, we go on about it, but you can see where the heart of darkness, which is one of the best stories. I actually have one of the original imprints of his book, I would, wouldn't I? And in the heart of darkness, what do we have? But we have something really passionate and really sexy and very exciting about what can we do now that's going to help the world make a better place for the younger people? Like my grandchildren are 19 to 25. I mean, I could have a great grandchild. I don't think so, because my kids are thinking more, they think more about adoption as opposed to procreation and putting more people on the planet. They have a whole different consciousness. Everything's going to be fine. If they're going to be anything like these kids and their particular groups and friends and their cohorts, I don't think we're going to have, it's just going to be as bad as it always is living on planet Earth. But you see that Pluto is, in fact, the guardian of all of Gaia's wealth. He's not a bad guy. I mean, he drew a short straw. There was Zeus and Poseidon and Hades. And they had to take the rulership of the sky, the earth, and the underworld. And so they drew straws. And Zeus got the heavens and Poseidon the horses and the seas and the underground streams. And poor old Hades heads down, and if you're in Hades, how do you get a girlfriend? Well, you just conspire with your brothers and you make it happen. And how do you get her to come and go so you're not there all the time? You set up a system wherein you have seasons. And so we have seasons in our lives, we have seasons in our world, we have seasons in our experiences. And I think it's so terribly important that we realize that, we have to consider the real very possibility that, it isn't really the end of the world, but it is the end of the world as we know it today. And we need to stick with our cohorts. We need to really be able to talk about our own selves and what our experiences are, which doesn't mean that we want to bore everybody witless at the dinner table. Please don't. I would not endorse that. And but I think too that what's happening is that if life is everlasting, then death is ever waiting. You see. And in both cases, neither say anything negative about the human race. And yes, good, excellent. How do I end the show?
Thank you, Erin. Just stop share at the top of the page.
Right, thank you, Linda. I've asked Linda to give me a little check. I don't think we have this.
We have 3 more speakers. You'll have many more opportunities to speak again, Erin.
Yes, no, I'm pleased.
Yeah,
Michael, where's Michael?
Not yet. He's not his turn.
It isn't.
No, the next speaker is Cili Cline.
I see. Okay.
Cili, please go ahead. And unmute.
I've unmuted. Hello, everyone. How are you today? Right now, we have Venus placed nicely between Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. Uranus is conjunct my natal Venus. So I'm coming now to speak to you from the heart about these external collective planets, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and how that collectiveness can come into and relate to our persona, our individual experience of what we're going through and breaking through in realizing and understanding and growing beyond ourselves, the history of this planet, of the cosmos itself, and our trajectory into the Aquarian age. Pluto entered into Capricorn in 2008. Uranus moved through Aries that squared Pluto in 2008. Neptune, as a backdrop of higher spiritual consciousness and bringing all of this tension through, moved into its natal sign of Pisces in 2011 and will stay with us till 2026. So we have Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, all active in this time of destruction, in this time of in this time of letting go, in this time of change and death The Kali Yuga time period is upon us. The Mayan calendar has come to an end. We have the cycles and these moments of shifting that's happening everywhere. We can see it in the world through all means and ways. What is happening within us? How are we personally, as Erin mentioned the seasons, how are we moving through the season of awakening in consciousness, moving beyond our understandings and limitations of all that has been here in a third dimensional setting? We have the astrology that shares cosmic rhythms and planets, the mythologies of that, the sacred geometry in terms of mathematics, numbers, lines, and arrangements. Well, we have our physical body. We have our emotional body. We have our mental body. We have our spiritual bodies. And I can tell you, in this last month, I've gone through an ego death. Oh my God, my mind went into a wash. Streamlines, thinking, timelines merging, seeing all my past lifetimes, this lifetime, just running through, intersecting, making connections. My emotions, such upheaval, such rage, such pain, such not knowingness. And my body went into being hot and cold and numb and dead, and yet also having these amazing awakening experiences through my consciousness of all this light pouring through. It was a complete, amazing inner storm of reconstruction. Saturn, that is relative to our sun, with the earth and us in between, is realigning with all of our inner planets and ourself so that we can come into a new organized pattern from the chaos that we are experiencing now. So how do we manage this? What are we doing personally that is reflected outwardly, that's outwardly reflected inwardly? And that comes to the heart. It comes to the stillness of the mind, to not get caught or pulled too much off center. With that being said, let's bring in the planetary alignments to the body. We have the root chakra relative to Pluto, Saturn, and Uranus. What do we have at our crown chakra? Neptune. As above, so below. Lower depths, darkness, above, higher consciousness, spiritual ideals, yet not in form. The two come together, heaven and earth meet. The masculine and the feminine meet. We also have the right and the left, the masculine and the feminine meet. We also have the future and the past, masculine and feminine meet. This happens in our heart center. So if we can all just take a moment now and remember what love means, what relationship means. May it be in opposition of 180 degrees or in square of 90 degrees. May it be a conjunction that's all bound out and in one spot, but doesn't have the space of either directional movement to move or go to have relational understanding. Taking a deep breath into our hearts and exhaling, releasing the energy down our spine into the ground, growing the roots. Inhaling into our heart, exhaling down the spine through our roots into the center core of the earth, because our body is the earth. The earth is our body, we are the earth, and we are all here together, moving through this awakening of consciousness into higher understandings of the ideal of the golden age that in all of astrology we know it coming right back around. We're about ready to make that turn. So we're centered through the heart, through our breath, to the center of the earth, relaxing the coccyx bone, the hip bones, centering down. Breathing down, relaxing. Now breathing from the center of the earth, up the spine, into the heart, up the heart, up the spine, up, 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 to the crown, and exhaling out. And on the exhale out, we reach from above the crown chakra, breathing in the light, and exhaling, gliding like a Neptunian waterfall all the way through into Pluto's underworld, allowing the Sushumna, the spine of Saturn, to allow new constructs to come through and take place of what has been and what has not yet been created. That's happening through us. What is our ideal vision for the future? What is our forgiving and understanding and learning and growing from our cultural past, our genetic past, our collective past, and even our cosmic past of creation? Now is the time, with clear vision, as all falls away, to remember what the heart desire is within you and your vision of love, relation, offering, caring, and sharing as we work upon this axis of Capricorn and Cancer. May we find balance between the feminine and the masculine. Make use of the Capricornian way of the water goat, the goat and the mountain goat. In the darkest period of winter, we come from the waters. We've developed, we're walking up this mountain because the earth, as Taurus and Uranus, is shaking and trembling because something new, birth, must come through. May we all find love and understanding with one another, within ourselves, as our whole system of being comes into a restructured place out of the chaos that is Pluto and beyond into Eris. Remember what Eris does? She shifts it up. And why? Because there's always more. Thank you.
Cili, thank you so much for that meditation. Absolutely fantastic. Erin.
You're welcome.
Unmute.
I just thought to myself, am I really meant to say something after that? Because, you know, I just felt like it was very beautifully, poetically put. And it also has some intellectual rigor as well. I mean, we're talking here about being able to combine our structure, our Saturn, and Pluto, our depth. And this is what I think what is so great about the spontaneity of how this panel wasn't created. It came up and out, and suddenly we were doing it, Linda, and now we're still doing it, and people are so fascinating. I never get enough of ideas, of people's thinking. And so thank you very much for what you did. It's extremely deep and very sensitive. Thank you.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Erin, we actually have two more speakers.
Oh, I've got Michael and who else?
And Sue Hillyard, and Sue is next.
Oh, yes, I don't need to show any more things. Not right now.
Can if you like later, but let's hear from Sue from now.
I'd like more people to speak, and that would be great.
Welcome, Sue.
Hi there. So what I would like to do is to invite Neptune to the conversation.
Oh, okay, I'll turn.
We'll see how it goes. I'm going to share my screen and turn off my video. So let's see. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay. So is that shared now?
Yes, it is, Sue.
Okay. And let's see. Stop the video. Okay. So why I wanted to bring Neptune is because the coming Saturn-Pluto conjunction will be exactly trine the USA Cili Neptune, as transiting Saturn, or rather transiting Neptune, is now conjunct the Cili secondary progressed sun. And it will move into a square with the USA natal Mars. In addition, once Neptune leaves Pisces, we will experience more than a dozen Neptune-Pluto sextiles that are part of an 82-year pattern, which by the time it finishes, will have spanned half of the zodiac. So here's the first of the last Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 1982 at 27 degrees Libra 36, with Mars out of bounds in Capricorn at the time. The approaching solar eclipse on Christmas Day this year is close to the degree of this previously out of bounds Mars. I'm thinking that maybe the eclipse could be recalling, perhaps helping to wrap up and signal the ending of that previous Saturn-Pluto cycle. And I saw here that Neptune had been approaching a sextile to Pluto at that time, and as it turns out, from 1950 to 2032, they are to perfect that sextile a total of 50 times. The previous 1947 Saturn-Pluto conjunction, with Neptune approaching the first round of the Neptune-Pluto sextiles. Mars was also out of bounds for this event, and a solar eclipse will occur near the spot on the summer solstice next year. Here's the coming Saturn-Pluto conjunction with Mercury, and this time Mercury is out of bounds. And here we have the coming conjunction chart placed around the Cili USA natal and progressions. It forms a quincunx to the Cili natal Mars, right here, and a trine to natal Neptune. In addition to the approaching USA Pluto return, here, the progressed Neptune is moving into a trine with natal Pluto, while Neptune transiting down here is moving right along with the secondary progressed sun, as well as an opposition to natal Neptune. Of note here is that Cili natal Mars and Neptune are in a disseminating square to each other. So Mars is the focal point of the forming T-square between transiting Neptune, moving into an opposition to natal Neptune. It is also activated, coincidentally or not, by Donald Trump's natal sun and moon, as well as this morning's or yesterday's full moon. This chart shows the 3 rounds of Neptune-Pluto sextiles that have been occurring since 1950. The first set went until 1956. From 17 degrees and 21 minutes to 29 degrees and 57 minutes of Leo and Libra, or Libra and Leo rather, with 15 events. Then there were 21 sextiles between 1976 and 86, from 11 degrees 49 minutes of Sag and Libra to 4 degrees 52 minutes of Capricorn and Scorpio. And the next round, starting in 2026, that will last until 2032, will have 13 sextiles between 4 degrees 20 minutes and 14 degrees and 1 minute of Aries and Aquarius. I've included this quote from Astrology King regarding the natal Neptune sextile Pluto aspect, because it seems to sum up their interaction quite well. Humanity is undergoing an evolutionary leap forced by powerful change. You have a role to play in adapting humanity to survive extreme change. A major part of this role is transforming everything from communication to spirituality, creativity to sexuality. The ultimate aim is to bring people closer together, not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense. You are reaching a realization that only in a mass movement sharing one superconscious can humanity evolve fast enough to avoid extinction. Intense sensitivity to the destruction unleashed by industrialization will lead to a transformation in energy generation and slow the degradation and depletion of shared resources. Your input to the collective consciousness is transforming how we communicate and live with each other through political, religious, and cultural renewal. Old systems and beliefs based on empire and superiority are disintegrating. In their place, you are dreaming up or imagineering a more humanitarian approach and shared responsibility for the welfare of everyone and everything, the collective dream. Richard Tarnas in Cosmos and Psyche said, the major Neptune-Pluto cyclical alignments appear to have coincided with especially profound transformations of cultural vision and the collective experience of reality, which often took place deep below the surface of the collective consciousness. And here's the first Neptune-Pluto sextile of this current series starting in 1950, with both of them retrograde. And interestingly, both Uranus and Pluto were out of bounds at that point. And here will be the final one of the series in 2032 on February 29th, Leap Day, as part of a kite pattern with Saturn and the Moon, with Jupiter close to the point of the 2020 Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And the next Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2053 will be in Pisces. Coincidentally, close to where Neptune is transiting now. Venus at that point will be out of bounds, and Jupiter close to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 1982. By then, 2 of the Venus star points will have transitioned from Aries and Scorpio into Pisces and Libra, trading the Mars and Pluto ruled signs for the Venus and Neptune ruled ones. And then I have the Sabian symbols for the 2 most current Saturn-Pluto conjunctions. Libra 28, a man becoming aware of spiritual forces surrounding and assisting him. I'm not going to read it all, but what he says is every individualized organism is part of a larger organized whole. Whether or not it is aware of this or of the sustaining power of the whole. And then Capricorn 23, a soldier receiving 2 awards for bravery in combat. Roger's note is the reward offered by society for the fulfillment of individual responsibility. What is implied here is a constant give and take between society and the individual person. Each one should be able to trust the other. And the key word recompense, a compensation for a well-done performance, a balancing of accounts. So, my question to you.
I know, yes, hi.
My question to you here is, how do you see this all playing out? You know, with respect to the current events, the approaching Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and factoring in the influence of Neptune with Pluto. Might this all signal a change from warring and violence to more peaceful times, and or a return to goddess consciousness? Perhaps a redefining of Capricorn in more spiritual terms. What do you think?
Well, I mean, thank you for all the work you did. That was pretty phenomenal stuff. I really find it to be, I'd like you to keep that up.
Okay.
Yeah, because the latter part you were writing about with the, there, yes. Indeed. I think we have to go through a lot more violence and alienation and displacement of groups and collectives and families, unfortunately, through this period of time. They never seem to go as quickly as we would like them to go. And, a Saturn-Pluto conjunction is a very long evolutionary experience. And the fact that it's factored in with Neptune being involved as an almost constant sextile, but it will begin to elongate as Pluto begins to move further and further along, and it makes repeated retrogressions from 5 to up to 20 by the time we get into the period of time that even Jung, I shouldn't say even Jung, of all people, I would think he would be one of the people to think about the Piscean age. And in the book 9.2 of the collected works, he talks about preparing for a new age. And he talks about the fishes as a symbol of a dying age, which is a very unusual thought for someone of his era and epoch, but not an unusual thought for somebody like Jung, where absolutely everything is symbolic. Not a person can't go to the bathroom without him finding a really, really evolutionary reason for that to take place. And so I think that what you're talking about, what you have been talking about in the very complex horoscopes that you were showing, I think that it does signal a change from warring and violence to more peaceful times. But I wouldn't hold your breath. I think that we need to, teach our children well, as the song goes. I think we need to teach our children well. And that doesn't just include our children. It includes the people that we talk to, that we know and that we care about. We don't want to talk about this all the time. We might have a glass of wine and a laugh. But the fact is we need to return to the feminine function, not necessarily goddess consciousness. I don't know. There's a lot of names for it. It's fine to use that term, but I do think that the feminine side of Capricorn, being an earth sign, will have to take a new definition, and it will have to do with holding steady, holding consciousness in a feminine fashion. Because if we go back to the last epoch, post-heroic Greece into modern, quote, civilization, the development of what we have today, I think they had a very, very bad turn of events when the woman and the feminine was denigrated and basically annihilated. And so I think that there is only one other way to go, and that is to head towards integration of the feminine and it being in good relationship. So the anima and the animus, the anima being, the feminine within me and within all men, and the animus being the man within me and all women, that we actually, we start making love instead of war. Yeah, That's an old saying, make love, not war. And so I think that you've got a point there. Thank you very much for all that work you did.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for pulling it all together.
Yes, thank you very much, Sue. And now we go to our last speaker, Michael Bartlett. Welcome.
Thank you. And do I have control of the screen or no?
Yes.
I can share. Let's see. How do I do this?
You look great, Michael.
Oh, thank you. My little neighbor over there, Miss Erin.
Yeah.
How do I get this? Share. Screen. I don't know.
I think you just press on the green share button at the bottom, because I see you perfectly as you. The whole screen is you.
Right, but I want to do, how do I share my screen?
Okay, you click the green share button at the bottom of the panel,
right,
and then click on your document, your slides, and then click the blue share button.
Yeah, and it's not giving me any of that.
Okay.
I've only been able to even look at everyone today through like a little small screen, which has been really weird.
No, start again, try again.
Okay.
Okay, click once on the green share button, then click once on the document, and then click once on the blue share button, or twice, whoops.
That's the
perfect.
last person.
Yes, it is, okay.
Ah,
Well, the other participant is still sharing, so someone else is sharing theirs.
someone needs to cut their screen.
Desktop.
Linda's screen came up for just a minute, so try it again, Michael.
I'm trying to the instructions, and I clicked the button myself. So. Sorry. Michael, do you want me to go through that again?
No, I should be able to do it. Share. Oh my God, I have to go in there and do permission. Okay, share. Oh my God. One of those days, huh?
I was the same thing, Michael, when I first started, believe me. I felt like a crazy person.
Here it is.
There you go.
All right.
Okay, just X off that box.
Thank you for your patience.
Oh, good.
I'm sorry. Ready?
Oh, wow, yes.
Okay. All right, so so this is what it looks like. We've got the sun. So by the way, I'm Michael Bartlett. Thank you, from Santa Fe, just down the road from Miss Erin. Thank you for having me on, Linda, and London, everyone. So we have before us is an image of Capricorn's house. If you see this as a sign of the business office, and we've got the sun in
consulting room.
Sorry?
Is this your consulting room, Michael?
Yeah, I wish.
I'll stop.
This is part of the Astro Theater that I worked on, and this is one of the images for Capricorn, and then all the planet wearing signs. Here we've got the sun wearing Capricorn's clothing, Saturn hanging out in Mercury. You're going to be making their little movement across Capricorn. And then January 12th, of course, is when we're going to be in this great next period of Saturn and Pluto coming together. And it's been, when this has happened in the past, we end up with quite an interesting play of economic fortune from growth to collapse, so to speak. So we're talking from the conjunction phase to the opposition, which is the waxing cycle. Is considered an economic building time. So it's a time where we can really get out there and maybe have an opportunity to invest in things we want to see happen, to build into something that will be longer lasting. The economic growth implies a bright future, and government and businesses grow while that goes on. Of course, the stock market starts growing as well. And then we come to the opposition period. And when that happens, money being spent on previous growth that is no longer occurring starts to show up as deficits, starts to be, as they say in business, when a fad becomes such that your grandmother or your elderly aunts and uncles start saying they're going to invest in, it's probably not the right time to invest in it. It's past its boom time. Speculation, deficits, inflation, unemployment in the stock market becomes very reactive during this period. Of course, is a 32 to a 37 years old, which is of course a generational marker. As we know, some of us in this group are people who wear this personally, and there are many people on the planet still have it from the last two times when these two planets came together. So the last time, of course, as many have been speaking to, was in November of 1982. We had the AT&T breakup. We had Canadian sovereign statehood. Erin can probably talk about that. The Falkland Islands issue, which will be interesting because we'll talk about that again in a second. That was the issue between Argentina and England over a series of islands. It was basically where they raised sheep. And Michael Jackson did his video Thriller, which was probably one of the most viewed music videos at that time. The previous period when this happened was back in August of 1947. We here in New Mexico are very much aware of the Roswell incident. And those of you outside of New Mexico might know this is when there was a crash in the desert, and a lot of hush hush and Area 51 sort of speak and kind of talk about that. So there's kind of an interesting alien aspect to this possibly. The sounder
Reincarnated from him.
Sorry?
I was reincarnated from him because I was born in November of 47.
There you go.
So
there you are. That's through aircraft, and the war begins. This is between Russia, of course, and the U.S., namely. And as someone was speaking to earlier, the states of Israel, India, and Pakistan gained their independence. But Pakistan gained its independence from India, and there was the division. And the cycle before that was back in October of 1914. The Government of Ireland Act, where Ireland started to claim its independence from the British Empire. Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated, which of course began the First World War, which involved a lot of countries and finally involved the United States when we finally got involved. Interestingly enough, some would say that one of the reasons why World War I actually ended was because of Spanish influenza. When we think about the amount, many people who fought in World War I had never left their local rural areas. So when you bring all these people from all around the world and you start putting them together, then all these little bugs, germs, and things that we're all used to where we live is shared amongst other people, and not everyone has the same immune system, especially thinking about people being on farms and all the different diseases that can happen from just living on a farm. And then interestingly enough, there was the Battle of the Falkland Islands back then in 1914. And so to see the recurrence of it in 1982 is very interesting. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe there'll be another one that happens in January. As you can see, a lot of these issues have to do with independence and boundaries, as was spoken to before, and setting limits, carving out a place. In a sense, through the ways of making boundaries, it gives people the ability to claim their space and to claim their sovereignty, as with Canada and Ireland. And Gandhi gains his title of Mahatma, the Great One. One of the good things in 1914. So the hallmarks of this kind of union are war, division. I like to think of it as being consolidated power. These are times when people with money come in and purchase a lot of things for pennies on the dollar, and then people are further, more marginalized. It'll be interesting to see, as you see with these individuals who have these signatures. Bill Gates is born with a Saturn Pluto square. the wealthiest man on the planet. He just beat out Bezos once again. I think those two are in the lead for ruler of the universe or something. Rupert Murdoch, sorry, the media mogul. He has Saturn and Pluto in opposition to one another. And then David Rockefeller, the Rockefeller clan, had it as a conjunction. So you can see, you know, even as a hallmark in one's personal chart, what that can build, what it can create, what it can help render unto the earth. So of course, you know, when we're talking about Pluto, we're talking about power. And with Saturn and Pluto together, we're talking about an amazing amount of power. Separation, as we spoke to before. And then for the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, it's going to be, of course, January 12th of 2020. It's happening at 22 degrees of Capricorn. And we're fortunate enough to only have a single pass. Of course, we're already in it. We're already experiencing it at this time. So this is just going to continue to be kind of like, I think of Saturn and Pluto as being those ways in which we have to, what's the right term for it? When we are forced to do things that we really have to do. Saturn and Pluto do not permit for luxury. Saturn is bare bones. You know, in the ancient world, it was the last visible planet. It's the last planet in the ancient world for astrology. And because it was the last planet you can see with the naked eye. And Pluto, until recently, of course, well, in the last few years, was considered the last existing planet. So there's this way that speaks to limitation and boundaries. And Pluto and Saturn together to me is very alchemical, because Saturn, I think of it as being the lead and Pluto being the radioactivity. And when we're attached to things, and this is what I mean by as far as luxuries, when we're attached to things, through the cycles of life, there are periods, like Erin said, you know, when we have to go into our winter time, you know, when we have to experience loss. And it teaches us the importance of the beauty and of the spring, so to speak. So if we're attached to holding on to, say, a car that isn't doing really well for us and is nickel and diming us and is costing a lot of money, but we're attached to it because it was our grandfather's car, or our mom, when our mom passed away, gave us the car, you know, but it's no longer really serving its worth, it might be time to let go of it. It's a luxury to hold on to that. It's a luxury to keep that going, because, you know, the truth is you need to maybe be thinking of being a little more leaner and meaner. That's, you know, sort of what's called upon in this time period with Saturn and Pluto coming together. This is going to specifically be affecting you if you have any planets from 12 degrees of Capricorn to 2 degrees of Aquarius, or 12 to 29 degrees of the cardinal, or 0 to 2 degrees of the fixed. These are going to create square and oppositions, which will require awareness and resolution. So, you know, looking to see where these planets are hitting in your personal chart are going to see, you know, what you can do with it. If it's a square or an opposition, it's going to be in your face. It's going to require you to pay some attention. The good news is it's a single pass. The bad news is it's a single pass. So, I mean, in a single pass, you know, means that there's a strength and an impetus to it. There's not the usual, you know, 3 passes, and you kind of get a sense of being able to resolve the energies over, you know, an extended period, you know, up to an 18-month period of time. But we're not really being given that luxury. It's kind of like the pedal to the metal. And then if you have any planets from 12 to 29 degrees of Earth, meaning Taurus or Virgo, this is going to be trining energy, which is can be very supportive if you happen to have a big project or an overhaul, something that you really, you know, a house renovation would be really great. If you want to go in and, you know, if you're one of those types that goes in and cleans up businesses or cleans up people's homes or cleans up, you know, things, this would be a really great time to go in and use that energy. And I'm putting the squares and the trines together in this kind of a sense, because it's really important to understand that just as squares kind of force us to pay attention to things, trines require us to, if we put effort into them, we can make it happen. It's not something that's just given to us, you know, gratis. It's something we, you know, it really helps if we kind of put forth an effort. And especially, I think, when we're speaking of these Earth planets, because the Earth planets really want to make something happen in the first place. And of course, tighter orbs make for more intense expressions. The days leading up to the 12th of January are going to be pretty intense. I mean, I think we're going to be seeing quite a bit of drama played out on the world stage between now and the 12th of January. And so, you know, think about what was going on for you back in November of 1982, August of 1947. I don't think there's anyone in the room old enough to remember October of 1914. You know, this is about 1% that's, you know, probably become, you know, a quarter of a percent that still owns this amazing level of asset. We talk. Hi, Erin. You want to unmute yourself?
Yes. Hello. So am I supposed to talk about inside the brain of Bill Gates? Because I mean, I have absolutely no idea how it works.
Actually, I think that's a series on Netflix. So I'm tempted to watch it. I haven't watched it yet, but it's been an interesting series about, you know, kind of how his mind works. And
well, it's so interesting the way you tied in those dates. I mean, it's so clean. I mean, you didn't, you know, doll it up with loads of images and stuff like I do, and you know, and putting the list there made it really, really evident as to what I knew exactly what was going on at that time. You know, exactly. You know, as I say, I mean, I can relate to myself what you were saying, especially about resources and how I might, because I have no Earth in my horoscope, right? And so I'm not exactly a person who understands being attached to the planet in a way that's sensible. And so, at least according to some people, and I'm sure to my clients, of course, I'm incredibly sensible. But I am definitely going to have to be doing some hard work on this one myself personally. And I wouldn't be at all afraid to use some of what you've been talking about with client work and their resources, and keeping in mind those dates. I mean, those dates are resonant. I mean, I think all of us are of an age where we do remember them. Yeah. Yeah, this is good to run back through those because, you know, August of 47, I jokingly said that I am the reincarnation of the alien, right? Because I was born November of 47. Yeah. And then I come back to New Mexico. I've never been to Roswell. Don't want to go there. Don't care about the guy. And then October, you know, 1914. Well, those are important dates because I come out of Ireland as well. Yeah, I mean they're all part of this situation, and your prediction possibly of another Falkland encounter is very interesting. I wonder what the royal family will do with that one.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, my grandfather was born in October 1914, and so when I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, that's, you know, that was his birthday, and it's like, and he was such a, you know, it's a very powerful energy for a human being to wear, as you well know.
No kidding. Yeah. Yeah, and when I'm looking at this business, the scary part for me is actually having resources and being able to manipulate with them, or even get some, and deal with it. And I guess it's part of the critical aspect of not having anything in Earth. And then suddenly we have Saturn, Pluto, which I have in my 9th house. So what's my 9th house? What's Saturn and Pluto and Mars square my sun, squared by my sun ascendant? It's all up here. It's not in my wallet. It's impractical, but it's not what I'm giving to others. They think it's practical. And there isn't a financial exchange naturally. And you do people's horoscopes for a living as well. And, you know, when you do things.
It's practical.
What? It's terribly practical.
I would say it's an abstract practical. Because it's like, it's abstract in a way, but it's also really, you know, I mean, it is your means. I mean, your brilliance is what gives you your higher philosophies, your ability to structure that. You're a way to, you know, be a fiercely powerful scorpionic being. It means those three together, and provide the information and the brilliance that you provide, the research, your books. I mean, my God, it's a tireless font of energy that, you know, as you well know, it wears the body out.
Yes, it does. I'm afraid it's taken its toll, And now I have the Saturn Pluto, and I sat there out there last night looking up at the stars, the planets, and looking at the full moon. And I felt a little bit of fear. Yep, I have to admit it. Yes, there's a little fear going on around here. Yeah, because I think if you can't face your fears, then you're never going to deal with them.
And I mean, this is such a great time. I mean, again, you know, not facing your fears is a luxury. And I don't think Saturn and Pluto afford those sorts of luxuries to us mortals.
No, they're just too adamant. I mean, they're very adamant. And adamant, of course, comes from the sickle, you know, what Kronos castrated is Uranus with the adamant sickle. Yeah, so it's like that molten glass that comes out of a volcano. And so if you're going to be adamant, that means you've got to be really, really clear and cut through the thickness of the Pluto garbage that's there. That, you know, it's tough work. It's tough work. But thank you. I'm so appreciative of being able to share.
We've been fed an amazing diet. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, help. I need an astrologer.
Exactly.
Where's your trade? Oh, great. Thank you so much for your contribution, Michael. It was a tremendous wrap-up. Tremendous way of being able to consolidate all of this wonderful, some of it very airy and, you know, quite out there, and others of it, you know, pretty cyclic, and others like linear. And then you come in with this, you know, that I mean, I remember staying with you, and you were just starting that astro drama.
Astro theater.
Program. Yeah. And so when I saw those guys, I thought, that's his ideal office. That's what he wants for an office.
That would be a great office. That'd make my Capricorn very happy.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much. Erin, does anyone have any questions for Erin or comments they'd like to make before we wind down?
I'm available if you wish.
Okay, I guess we've
stunned. I think they just need
we've received our full.
Depending on your time zone, you need to go and do something with the self that brings it into the higher space.
Okay, Erin, any final thoughts on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction?
Yeah, the biggest thing that crosses my mind is being kind to myself and being kind to others, and you know, not isolating, because that's a tendency for the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, is for people to hide out because they don't want anybody to know that they're just a piece of shit, right? You just, that's just not in the cards. So the tendency is to you know, undervalue and underestimate Saturn-Pluto, big power struggle between the two, you know, sort of grandiose characters, because they're both pretty dramatic in mythology and psychology. Psychologically, they're really dramatic. And so everybody's thinking, well, how do I put a fence around and contain in a positive way my core power? Because if we think in terms, now I'm going to use an image that nobody likes, but you know, you every so often you'll see those those nuclear reactors. Okay, look, what's inside, the very inside, is what's called heavy water, which is Scorpio and Pluto, yeah? And then it's got to be contained with concrete of great, incredible strength and magnitude. So the idea is to contain your core power so that you don't just blow off and murder thousands of people, psychologically or otherwise, with this uncontained nuclear reactor. There's nothing wrong with using nuclear power if it's clean. You know, we haven't got there yet. We haven't reached the level of responsibility collectively. You see, because everybody's out for money as opposed to safety and, you know, using it as an environmental asset. I really do think that nuclear power is going to play a great role, and I pray that it's going to be in a way that will actually decrease the amount of waste that we actually are using, you know, in garbage. And so it's always made me kind of, you know, look, I drew a picture for my kids of a nuclear, you know, power plant with its shape, and I said, that's concrete. And then, I don't know how do people how do they text me when I'm online? It's still, duh. Anyway, I'll learn more about the control of the computer and the power that it has over me. That's very important, isn't it? I think ending on that note, I think I've pretty much covered the needs. Oh, and I have to do something about money, so we'll deal with that too.
Oh, Erin, thank you so much. What a fantastic.
Everybody, you're also wonderful.
Just wonderful. Okay, I'll unmute everybody now to please thank Erin Sullivan.
Thank you, Erin.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you, Erin.
So much.
Thank you very much for your participation. I really appreciate it.
And thank you to all our speakers today. And Erin, we're doing another panel discussion next February.
Yes.
And we'll be looking forward to that very much.
Right, because then we can talk about what happened. I mean, that's like what really happened, after the Saturn Pluto conjunction.
Exactly. Okay.
Anyway, God bless you all. I love you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye.